What's up? Miss Osborne back again for another flip video. Today we're going to be looking at Napoleon's France and the Haitian Revolution. Napoleon had really grown in power through the military ranks before he became emperor over much of Europe. After defeating Napoleon, though, the French European allies, they sent him into exile and they started a meeting in Vienna to restore order and stability to Europe overall. These revolutionary ideas had taken place over the course of a period of time, and now they were influencing some of the Latin American colonies as well. The essential question that we're going to answer in this video is, how did Napoleon rise to power? And then what were his most important policies? Goldnug historians will analyze political, economic, military, and cultural methods that Napoleon used to gain power. While you're watching, make sure that you're taking notes in either Cornell or outline format as we've talked about in class. It's okay if you have to pause or rewind the video to make sure that you understand all the information and you're taking good notes. The problems that had been associated with the French Revolution gave Napoleon the most perfect opportunity to rise to power. He had been a brilliant military leader that won a lot of battles and won him a lot of fame with the French people. He was able to overthrow the weak directory that had been established after the French Revolution in a coup d'etat. A coup d'etat is the French word for a forced transfer of power. Sometimes they're violent and sometimes they're peaceful. After he had successfully thrown the directory out, he replaced the directory with a three-man consulate. The consulate voted Napoleon as the head of the consul, which effectively made him a dictator, otherwise known as the Emperor of France. He pledged to uphold the revolutionary reforms, though, and that made him very, very popular with the French people. France willingly gave up its freedom because he promised to bring back peace, because there had been that reign of terror thing where people were real scared of everything, prosperity, in which they would make sure that everybody had enough to eat, and glory to France. They voted him Emperor Napoleon I through a plebiscite, or a ballot in which the voters said yes or no, which gave them the ability to vote and made him seem like he was valuing their voice in society. Now, Napoleon desired to build an empire for France by ruling all of Europe and also trying to extend as much power into the Americas as possible. In America, France had already controlled Louisiana, Florida, and Haiti. But following the Haitian Revolution, which we'll talk about in a little bit later, Napoleon ends up giving up this dream of owning the Americas, and he sells Louisiana and Florida to the United States. He also started a series of wars that became known as the Napoleonic Wars in Europe in order to expand his empire. The wars lasted until 1815, which is nearly a decade long. During this time, Great Britain is going to be France's greatest enemy. Britain began gathering other European nations that became their allies that agreed to fight together against France. Britain's greatest advantage was their armada, or their navy, but France didn't have a navy. Napoleon continued to wage economic warfare instead of actual naval warfare through something called the Continental System, by which he closed all European ports to British goods. The British responded with its own blockade, or shutting off ports to keep people and supplies from moving in and out of the European ports. So both sides at this point were completely at a standstill. They started seizing neutral ships suspected of trading with the other. So the French began seizing American ships, and American ships began seizing British ships, and it just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, eventually resulting in the War of 1812, which you'll talk about in American One. Napoleon's continental system failed to bring Britain to its knees. The trade restriction just kind of created scarcity of goods, in which sent prices soaring and intensified resentment against the French power. When there's less goods available, the price of the goods is going to go up. The more rare it is, the more needed it is, the price is going to go up. While Napoleon had proved himself as a military leader, later on his Russian campaign, in which he tried to take over Russia as well, eventually leads to his downfall as a whole. This is what Europe looked like under Napoleon. You can see here that the states under Napoleonic control included France, Spain, the Confederation of the Rhine, all the way down to the boot of Italy, and then the Grand Duchy of Warsaw. The other green states are the ones that are allied with Napoleon. While Napoleon was in power, his greatest policies were strengthening the centralized government in France, and that he did that by establishing order, by encouraging new industry, building new roads and canals, and helping to set up public schools. He kept the peace with the Catholic Church by coming to an agreement with the Pope called the Concordat, and this allowed for the French to be able to keep the Church under the control of the government and recognized France's religious tolerance, but it kept the peace with the Catholic Church. He also established the Bank of France that allowed for more economic stability and the ability to regulate the economy. Lastly, and most importantly, he created the Napoleonic Code that made laws uniform across the nation and eliminated many of the injustices. It included the Enlightenment principles such as equality for all citizens before the law, religious tolerance, and most importantly, it established a network of high schools, universities, and technical schools to educate boys and make them more productive citizens. Following Napoleon's defeat in Russia, the European powers allied themselves against France, and they were able to defeat France by marching all the way into Paris after attacking them multiple times. One of the terms of France's surrender was that Napoleon be removed from power and exiled to an island called Elba. Napoleon was just waiting for his opportunity to return to power in France, though. The Allies were able to restore the French monarchy, recognizing Louis XVI as the rightful king of France, and then redrew the borders to what France had been in 1792. Many citizens, however, feared to return to the old order before the French Revolution overall. Napoleon was able to return to France. He hitched a ride on a ship and was met with cheers and applause by the French people, who liked him because he was able to recognize that they had rights, and he held up those Enlightenment ideals. This began Napoleon's 100 days in which he ruled over France for just a short period of time. The European allies weren't going to let him stay for long, though. They began gathering their troops to defeat him yet again. He met up with the European allies at the Battle of Waterloo, and overall, the Europeans were able to defeat the French. At this point, the European allies were not about to send him anywhere that he could come back from, so he was sent to St. Helena in the South Atlantic, which was much farther than Elba had been, and he died 6 years later on the island. The European allies then met at the Congress of Vienna to create a plan to restore the order and stability to France. Overall, they wanted to redraw the map of Europe in order to make it more equal amongst the European powers. There were a few key players there: Lord Castlereagh of Great Britain, Tsar Alexander I of Russia, King Frederick William III of Prussia, and Prince Clemens von Metternich of Austria. And then Charles Maurice de Talleyrand attended on the behalf of the French, since there was no ruler at that point. Metternich wanted to restore the balance of power to make Europe peaceful again. He also wanted to restore the old monarchies and then compensate the European allies for their losses. The Congress of Vienna had changed the borders to make sure that France would not regain power again. They surrounded France with stronger countries, and they also created the German Confederation that combined the German states and Prussia together to create a stronger front against the French. They also required the French to pay a large sum of money to the European allies to compensate them for the damages. Following the revolution, much of Europe was once again ruled by monarchs, but they didn't retain the same power that they had previously. Common people now realized that they had more power, and they were wanting their equal treatment under the law. They now felt empowered and would use their influence to their advantage. These Enlightenment ideals and revolutionary thinking eventually led to many, many revolutions from Latin America to Romania until all of the monarchs were overthrown. This is what Europe looked like after the Congress of Vienna. If you remember, Germany had previously been allied with the French, and all of that space there in between had kind of been one large country. Now it was broken up into Switzerland, Romania, Austria, some smaller countries. Netherlands retained its autonomy, and then Italy also was broken up into smaller states as well. Now France kept its pre-revolution borders, and Spain got its power back. By the 1800s, there was a lot of tensions amongst different ethnic groups in Latin American society that had been colonized by the French and other European nations. The reforms imposed by the colonial authorities in Europe were leading to demands for change. The Enlightenment, as well as the American and French revolutions, inspired a lot of Latin America to seek independence. The most important of these was Haiti, also known as Saint-Domingue, was the first to break its ties with France. Saint-Domingue was known for its sugar plantations and one of the richest possessions. After France issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, it gave rights to all free men, even mulattoes or people who had mixed African and European descent. Toussaint L'Ouverture led a group of mulattoes and slaves against the French settlers. The French army and Toussaint struggled for months before they were able to reach an armistice in which Toussaint was thrown in jail, but the revolutionaries were still able to declare independence from France overall. Make sure that you read back over your notes and that you have all the necessary vocabulary given to you. Thank you for joining me for this video, and I'll see you in class.